Hiya, I'm Aminah. I'm an innovation specialist in the asset and intelligence team at Severn Trent Water.
Hi all, my name is Alpa Kapasi. I'm the Quality Diversity Inclusion Manager at the Order Common Project, which is an HS2 project in North West London.
Thank you so much, both of you, for joining us. So we're just going to go straight into the first question, and that is, what are the key steps organisations can take to ensure that workplaces are physically and digitally accessible to employees of all abilities? And if we start with Aminah.
Yeah, so I think the approach here, like it's worked well for us as a company and me as an individual, is to take the approach of assessing an individual's needs. So if we're talking on the digital accessibility, as an innovation specialist, part of my role is to go out and speak to those in the field if there's a need for the business to incorporate something, an innovation. As such, there's an exploratory phase where we go out and we spend a day in the life of people on the field or people working in the offices. And one of the things that we found when we were doing that was a lot of the field guys, when they're using apps to sort of store information or log information, they were using a lot of acronyms and a lot of slang, and what it was doing is skewing a lot of our results when we were assessing stuff that would contribute to some of our ODIs or our key metrics and things that we have to report on. And when I went to go research that, we realised that a lot of the field members of staff are neurodivergent. So as a result of that, we came up with a plan to sort of incorporate that into our apps and our power apps, and also there's Severn Trent do a lot of accessibility when it comes to using their websites. So I think in terms of digital accessibility, again, it's that, you know, assessing an individual's needs, and then when it comes to physical accessibility, again, an individual. So I'm a Muslim woman working in Severn Trent. I have a degree in chemical engineering, and when I was graduating, it was very male dominated. So when I moved over to Severn Trent, a part of my role back then, which was in water quality, was going out to sites, auditing sites, joining the field teams, and part of that was wearing PPE. And as you guys can see, I'm a Muslim woman wearing a headscarf. When I used to wear PPE, I used to have a lot of loose clothing. So if you can imagine, when you're on these industrial sites, there's these huge blower fans and all sorts. And when I used to walk past these fans, I used to think, oh, what if this gets stuck in there and there's a freak accident? And also, when I used to wear my PPE, it didn't actually used to fit my head, and that was because as part of wearing the headscarf, you've got to wrap it around your head a few times, and it makes your head a little bit bigger, so your helmet doesn't fit as snug. And what I did was I got in touch with someone in the PPE department, one of the managers and HR, and I just wrote them an email and I said that these are the problems that I'm having. As a Muslim woman, I just don't feel safe on site. I'm having to always adjust my PPE, and as a result, I can design something that would be useful. So what I did was I took inspiration from an athletic headscarf, which is like very minimal material, very snug fit, and I kind of got our PPE supplier to design something that would fit that prescription. And as a result, like I was the person who rolled out designed and rolled out the first PPE headscarf specific for Muslim women in the industry. And I think from the earlier conversations, people like me don't fall into one minority group. It's not that I'm just an ethnic minority, I'm a woman as well, and coming into such a male-dominated area, I had to kind of assess my own needs and take them forward. So I think one of the things companies should be doing is just assessing an individual's needs, seeing what works for them, and then kind of like pushing them and motivating them to make that change.
Yeah, that's fine. And then
I was just going to say that's really hard act to follow. Inspirational. I guess for me, it's really about it's about being proactive, and it's actually about thinking about physical access inclusion, access, and thinking about what that means on the various projects that we work on. And obviously, when you're working on a construction site, there's all sorts of challenges in terms of the type of work that we're doing, the environment that we're working in. So I started at Balfour Beatty about 4 years ago, and my first role was to go and work at Old Oak Common as the Quality Diversity and Inclusion Manager. And so when I joined, the project hadn't actually mobilised. So I had the privilege and fantastic opportunity of thinking about how do you build access and inclusion right from the very beginning. So you're not retrofitting it. Lots of organisations will quite often respond, as we've just discussed, will quite often respond when there are specific needs or individual needs, but actually thinking about how do we ensure that our environment is physically accessible, but also inclusive of different groups of people. So just very in brief, the approach that we took was that we worked with an access consultant. We worked with a company called Goss Consultancy. We partnered with them. And as a result of that partnership, we basically built access and inclusion into the very design of our site accommodation and our site overall. So in doing so, my requirement to them was that actually we needed to get disability access right as a basic, that's a minimum. But once you've got the disability access right, let's think about other groups of people. So for example, we have facilities that are gender neutral facilities for somebody that might be transitioning. We have multi-faith prayer rooms, which have got proper kind of ablution facilities for those that need to use them. We have spaces for returning mothers who may be coming back and may need to express milk. We also have what we call reflection rooms, and I'm constantly reminding people that those rooms are not able to go and hide and take phone calls and work on their laptops. They're actually there for people to have a bit of time out and have a bit of reflection. We also build well-being into the site accommodation. And so, for example, one of the things people remark on when they come to visit our site is when you go to the very top to our viewing gallery and you look down onto the site, you'll see in the compound area that we've got basketball nets, we've got table tennis tables, we've got football tables. And it's all about creating a space where people can have that downtime and we're looking after their well-being. But I guess the critical thing, so yes, we were very fortunate in that we had the opportunity to do this from the beginning, and our project is going to be around for another 6-7 years, I'm assuming. So we've got time to build all of that in and to make use of that. And I think it's around saying that, let's try and be proactive and not just respond to individual needs. So we have a changing places facility, for example, for disabled people, and one of the comments was made to me by a senior manager was, well, do we really know if anybody's going to need to use this? Like, why are we spending all this money on this facility? And my view is, if you have the facilities, people will come. That's how you will attract those more diverse people into your workforce. If you go into our female welfare facilities, they're huge. They're really expansive, lots of really good facilities in there. And again, we actually had a trade union rep who came around with us once, and he said, well, you don't have many women in the industry, why are you giving them this disproportionate amount of space? And again, our view is if we have the space, if we have the facilities, women will want to come and work here. I guess the other thing that I would add into this is that the process of developing that inclusive space, we went through a process of engagement and consultation with people right across the project, including our site operatives. And we talked about, what sort of things do we want? So when we talk about gender neutral facilities, we have colleagues saying things like, yeah, I'm not really sure, because we're going to have unisex toilets initially. And they said, well, I'm not really sure about going in there. Some of the women didn't feel comfortable with that facility. And so we ended up developing facilities which are for men, for women, accessible facilities, and gender neutral facilities. So we're meeting everybody's needs, but just simply having cubicles, for example, for each one of those groups. So that whole process of engagement has meant that people have a real sense of buy-in and a real sense of ownership. And so when you visit our project, if any of you have been there, you talk to people, and people are proud of what we have. People talk with great pride and great, just love the fact that it's such a great place to work. The other point I'll add just before we move on to the next question is around, it's one thing having the physical environment, but what you then need to do is to have a culture that supports that inclusive environment. So all the stuff we've talked about in terms of voluntary leavers, in terms of retention, it's really important that you get that inclusive culture right, so that not only will people enjoy working in that physical space, but actually they know that they're part of this inclusive culture, it's safe, it's accessible, and it's inclusive. Stop.
No, that was excellent. So the next question is about what role do leaders and managers play in helping make ensuring inclusivity is embedded into the workplace? So if we start with Alpa this time.
So I can't stress enough the importance of senior leaders and managers in terms of delivering this agenda. So when I first started looking at this, it was prior to my even joining the project, actually starting working with the project, but my manager got in touch with me and he sent me the design spec, and he sent me the tender documentation for the supplier that was going to build our smart accommodation. So I gave him some feedback on it. I gave him some feedback from a diversity inclusion perspective. But I said to him, look, if you really want to get this right, if you want to do this properly, you need to bring in these specialist access consultants and work in partnership with them. And he said to me, yeah, okay, I'll take that back to the senior leadership and we'll see what happens. Now, I kind of did this as a bit of a challenge. I wanted to test the boundaries. I wanted to see how far our senior leadership are willing to go in terms of really embracing this agenda. Senior leadership came back to me and they said, well, you know, our design partners are WSP, so we could just ask WSP to think about it. And my view was, well, no, because what WSP will do is give you the minimum that we need to do in terms of, say, building regulations, for example. But actually, we need to go above and beyond that. So they said to me, okay, well, go and find somebody for us, we'll have a look at it. And the reason I'm telling this story is because I think what I'm describing there is a relationship of trust. So the senior leadership trusted me enough to say, right, go and find us somebody, find the right partner, and then let's see where we go from there. So I went out, I did my research, came back with Trust Consultancy, who were incredibly competitive in terms of what they were charging, far more competitive. I have to say, I'm sorry there are any WSP colleagues in the audience, but they were far more competitive. And as a result of that, we partnered with Trust Consultancy all the way through the design and the build of our smart accommodation. And we still continue to work with them. So going back to the question, I think senior leadership role is absolutely imperative. It's critical. You have to have that relationship of trust, but also we've done quite a lot of work, and you know, it's probably another conversation, a lot of work around inclusive leadership and working with our senior leaders around taking on that role as inclusive leaders, modeling the right behaviours, setting the example, setting the carbon footprint in a sense for the organisation in terms of what's expected. And I think that has been critical to the success of what we've done.
Yeah, that's amazing. And also, so Aminah, I guess we're coming from this from a bit of a different angle, because you actually went to your senior leadership with an issue, not an ED&I specialist or an HR specialist. I think we're all really interested to know, what does that mean to you, and what process did you go through to get that buy-in from them?
Yeah, so I think with Severn Trent's culture, they have a strong health and safety culture, but also like a strong diversity culture. So my journey was quite easy. When I thought of the idea, I got in touch with HR and the PP manager, and I managed to just push it through. But I think that stage was fine. It was when I started to roll it out, and when it started to get the attention and the sort of, it went viral on LinkedIn, and I was like in the news and stuff. I think it was then where I realised how important the senior membership and their role is, just because it's them who are going to create that buzz around diversity and inclusion. They're the face of the company, so if you can get their buy-in, they're the ones who are going to encourage you and motivate you. So when I was, before I designed the PP headscarf, I was a very reserved individual, didn't really show my face, or wasn't very confident. I think if you talk to the Aminah 4 years ago, she wouldn't be able to sit on a panel like this and talk in front of a room full of people. And I think it was the senior members of staff who kind of encouraged me to take the idea forward and give it as much exposure as it does have. And also, we have advisory groups, or I guess employee networking groups in Severn Trent, where we have, I think someone mentioned it earlier, where we have our senior members of staff sponsoring them, and that's really important as well, because I can sit in that group and I can steer their direction, as someone who's sort of lower, on frontline staff, is having that sort of fluidity between levels, and being able to talk to senior members of staff and see their face, and tell them of issues that are happening in the company. And also another thing that we do, and I actively take part in is reverse mentoring. So our senior staff are really open to being mentored by those who are from different backgrounds, just so that they can sort of educate themselves on diversity and inclusion, and make sure that they don't have any blind spots when it comes to dealing with stuff like that. And I think if you educate them, then the education starts to trickle down the hierarchy. So yeah, that's
amazing. Yeah. So next question is about how do we get to the point where accessible sites are up and while the considerations are pressed into the tender stage and accepted by clients at the necessary cost? I think we just move towards Alpa.
So I think, as I said, I was in that privileged position where we were able to build accessibility right from the beginning. So I think it was really important. So I work with Balfour Beatty, for example, and one of the conversations we've had in Balfour Beatty is how do we build a kind of a blueprint or a bit of a template so that every time a project is being mobilised, we're taking this into account. So we've got a checklist list of the kinds of considerations. Now, we get people visiting us, and some of them will say to us, well, we're not on a £1 billion project like you are. We don't have those kinds of resources. We don't have that much money or capacity. And my view is that actually some of the things that we've done are simple. They don't actually cost a lot of money. You just have to think about it and you have to plan it from the beginning. And if you don't, then what happens is you're retrofitting, and that's going to cost you a hell of a lot more money. So why not do it from the beginning? So I think that it is about getting that documentation right in the first place. It is about working with the experts, with the consultants, with the people that actually know what they're talking about. So some of the stuff that Ghost Consultancies talk to us about, I've never even considered. So even if you look at stage here, for example, the light reflective values of the stair nosing, I've never heard of anything like that. And yet there I was engaging in conversations with them about what that needed to be to ensure that it was accessible to people with visual impairment. So there's a whole learning process, and if you do it from the beginning, you take your team or your colleagues on that learning process with you, and it's an education, ultimately. So my view is that it doesn't have to be hugely expensive. Some of the measures we put in place are really cost-effective and far better than retrofitting.
Yeah. Aminah, do you have anything to say on that one?
I guess, well, again, I'm not a professional in diversity. I don't have like a dedicated role to it, but what I will say is I think it really works if you just make something a standard. So if people are like building sites or planning to create a space for people, it should just be part of the standard, or something that's regulated when it comes to diversity and inclusion. Exactly how we have regulations on health and safety, it should be the same for diversity and inclusion. Because again, like with my story, it was a health and safety concern that led me to creating something that also nodded towards diversity and inclusion, and created so much noise around Muslim women in the industry and bringing them into the industry. So I think they kind of work hand in hand, and you shouldn't have anyone on your sites who fear their health and safety over their background if they do fit into that minority background. And similarly, anyone who is of a certain background shouldn't. Anyone no one should sort of jeopardize their upbringing or their religion or their ethnicity over health and safety as well.
Yeah, that's excellent. And then, so maybe you can get a final question. Someone's asked, how do we make sure that when someone comes into the workplace and maybe they have a problem or issue or something that needs to be fixed, how do we make sure that that just isn't something that they have to work on, and that is something that maybe the team is collectively improving, so that it doesn't just become an issue for them, but actually it's something that the business takes on themselves and works to improve? And I think we start with that.
Okay, well, we had a recent example of this where we had, so again, all of these people will say to me, we don't need these facilities because we don't have that many disabled people, that many people in wheelchairs. And we had a recent incident where one of our supply chain partners was recruiting a disabled person who was in a wheelchair, and they asked me to join them on a call to talk to this individual about their needs and their access needs. And the lovely thing about having that conversation with them right at that point in which they're going through the recruitment process, was that they were able to say to me, okay, these are the kinds of adaptations or the things that I'm going to need. Most of them were able to say, yeah, that's absolutely fine, we can deliver on every one of those. But then having that conversation, but it wasn't just me, it was myself, with the hiring manager and our supply chain partner, which is Mango Rock, along with the package manager, who's within our construction team, who looks after that package and that project. And so it was a team approach in terms of thinking about how is this going to work, what facilities do we need to provide, and how do we accommodate them. But it is so refreshing to actually be able to say, yeah, that's absolutely fine, we can cover all of those needs. There may be one or two things that we still need to improve, so it's still very much a work in progress. I'm not saying that we've got it absolutely right, but I think it is about having those open conversations, raising awareness, doing the training, so that people understand what disability confidence means, for example, and then it becomes something that the team as a whole will openly discuss. The other thing I'll mention is that actually we talked a little bit earlier about site operatives, and I think it's really important that we are engaging with our site teams and our site operatives. So we've got a pretty large program around behaviour change called our Respect program, and a big part of that has actually been about engaging with our site teams around the challenges that they face and how do we meet their needs quite specifically.
Yeah, and we have to be great if we could end on your experience with this.
Yeah, I think, so to answer the question, I think it works both ways. So there's a cycle, I mean, in my experience anyway, like I always feel guilty, or not guilty, but I always think, like, what did I expect from Severn Trent? Because a lot of people, when I tell them my story, they're like, so why didn't the company identify that need earlier? Or, you know, how was that missed as such a simple solution to such a big problem? And I was like, well, but it's not the company's fault. It's just that it's a two-way communication. So you can find yourself in a vicious cycle of, okay, if I don't speak up about my need, then no one's going to know. And then how a manager's going to know about a need if the employees don't speak up? And unless you break that cycle and empower your people to have the confidence to come forward and say, oh, there's this issue and it's not working for me, is there something that we can change? Almost 9 times out of 10 is such a simple thing that they can sort of implement to help that. So yeah, I think when it comes to workplaces, in my opinion, it's just a two-way thing. Like, you need to empower your employees to have the confidence to come forward with any issues that they have, but also unless you have employees of different backgrounds, you're not going to be able to identify gaps like that. So again, in the industry, I'm not too sure about nowadays, but back when I had graduated, there weren't many people like me in the engineering sector, and unless there was someone like myself who joined the engineering sector, we wouldn't have been able to identify such a gap.
Yeah, that's perfect. Thank you both so much. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.